Stock up and stock down from the Washington Commanders training camp as we move closer to the end of week 2, and some news and notes as one player hits waivers, making way for a new addition. All of that right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms. And we thank you for making us your first listen of the day or first view if you're checking us out on YouTube or on the WUSA 9 Plus app. The CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C., WUSA 9 has a new app that is a game changer for local news and sports. Just download the app from your Roku or Amazon Fire TV stick. I'm David Harrison, covering your Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. And my co-host is Chris Russell, the Rooster, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show, which you can find on the Team 980 Monday through Friday live, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, or anytime along with the show on the Audacy app. When we're not there, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at DHarrison82. Chris is at WrestleMania621. And the show is at LO Commanders.
All right, David. And as David mentioned, thank you, as always, for making us your first view and listen of the day, wherever you are and however you're consuming LOC. We appreciate you. David, let's start with the training camp report as we reach almost the 2-week mark of camp, or I should say about a week and a half in or so. And of course, with the open practice coming up at FedEx Field on Saturday night in front of, hopefully you wrote this up on SI.com's Fan Nation. It's in 2 different pieces. We'll put up the links at LO Commanders in just a little bit so that everybody can refer to it and click on it and check out David's work and all of the good work at SI.com covering the Commanders. But you had 3 guys that you isolated as stock up. Now, you've been at practice every single day, so you've been watching not only the top guys and the big name guys, but some of the guys maybe a little bit more towards the bottom of the roster or certainly battling for a roster spot.
Yeah, Chris, there's a lot of guys who have I like to say making some money for themselves, even though, they're not going to get raises necessarily for doing well in training camp. But I like to use that term. But yeah, guys who have stood out among the rest. And I really kind of focused so I did a stock up, stock down. We'll talk about both, obviously. And I kind of focused really on the wide receiver, tight end, and cornerback groups just because they're kind of the most interesting groups. I know everybody wants to talk about quarterback. Everybody wants to talk about linebackers. But really, when you talk about who's really making a splash and who's kind of getting left behind, those are kind of the most active groups from where I'm sitting. So I kind of stayed there, and I kind of cheated as well because it's supposed to be 3 up, 3 down. But really, my ups, there were 4 of them. So Dax Milne, wide receiver, number 15 on your programs, number 1 in your hearts. Look, I didn't see Dax in person last year, right? If you've been watching the show or listening to the show since I joined it or since before I joined it even, that, I wasn't on ground last year with you and with everybody else. So my impressions of Dax were from tape and some films that I had access to, and then watching him on TV on Sundays and everything like that, just like everybody else. But coming in here and talking to everybody else, he's put on some weight. It looks like he's a little bit bigger, so he's looking to be a little bit stronger, which will help in his separation, help getting off the line of scrimmage and all that stuff. But the speed doesn't look like it's gone anywhere. And his footwork, there have been some reps, honestly, where his footwork is so solid off the line of scrimmage, into the route, into the stem, into the break, that honestly I stopped watching after he gets out of the break, and I stop watching because whatever happens after that, he still won that route regardless of if the pass was completed for one reason or another. And there just have been some moments where, you always try to keep your composure, but there have been some routes that he's run that kind of made me, I don't want to say I stood up and cheered necessarily, because that's not what happened either, but definitely got a reaction out of me. So Dax Milne, and then you had the added special teams ability there, certainly making some headway for himself. To me, he's a roster lock. I don't know if anybody else out there thinks he's a bubble guy. I don't think he's a bubble guy. I think he's on the roster. In fact, I think for your first 5 spots, really, Terry McLaurin, Jahan, Dotson, Curtis Samuel, if he's healthy, Dax Milne, and then I have Cam Sims in there as well, another guy who's doing pretty well for himself in training camp. So for me, 5 receiver slots are already determined. It's going to be the last 2 if they do carry 7 again this season. Then I moved to tight ends, and this is where I cheated because I put Sammis Reyes and Curtis Hodges. And, Sammis, he's a great story, right? But he's a guy that unfortunately we didn't get to see during the OTAs. We didn't get to see during minicamp because he was dealing with some things. But back for training camp, and he had a really good day early on, had 3 catches during a 2-minute drill, 2-minute drive drill, and really kind of showed out there. And then blocking, he's still a very solid blocker, as you would expect. Curtis Hodges, for me, he might be more of a winner or more of a stock up type guy because more so because of the expectations, right? He's a little bit of a slimmer guy, doesn't look like he had an imposing character. And again, he was banged up during the earlier part of the offseason program as well. So coming into training camp, you didn't really know exactly what you were going to get from him. You saw some of the athleticism, some of the catching ability, receiver ability that you didn't really have a lot of doubts in anyway. But then when the pads came on, he was popping, he was blocking, he was moving up to the second level, shedding his first block, getting up to the next level, helping to open up lanes and holes for the running back. So really looking like an all-around type of guy. So those two guys making this job really, really hard for Ron Rivera and his staff to decide how many tight ends they're going to carry, and whoever gets left behind, who is it going to be, and how long are they going to be able to stash them for. And then finally, Benjamin St-Juste, the cornerback, moving from the outside into the inside. And I put him on there really, and I really wanted to emphasize him because he's a guy that I've been worried about. Coming into the whole thing, the whole taking over the nickel job and all that, I was kind of worried about whether he had the fluidity to do it, the feet to do it. Early on, he kind of looked a little stiff in the hips, kind of trying to flip him in transition and stay with guys. Curtis Samuel kind of gave him some work here one of these days, and it just kind of raised some eyebrows for me. And I just kind of wanted to see a little bit better in zone. Looks good, no problem, no issue. And man, that's where I had some issues. But as the days went on, there was even one day during the individual drills where they're just, the coach is out there and they're giving a back, a left, a right, and turn, catch the ball. Even in that, you could see the fluidity start to build, and he's lining up with other guys that are kind of known for that, and you can see him kind of keeping up with the agility that those guys have. And then in the one-on-ones, as soon as the pads went on, Benjamin St-Juste is winning matchup after matchup, and he's really holding his own out there. Plus, you still see defensive backs coach Chris Harris pulling him to the side, coaching him up, and Benjamin St-Juste going out there, taking all that knowledge and putting it into production on the field.
Yeah, I'm going to go for my 3 up. I'm going to go with some bigger names. One, a rookie, though, and that's Brian Robinson Jr. I know you had a quote from Charles Leno on Thursday after the morning walkthrough about, his style of back and being the type of guy that he wants to block for. I think Brian Robinson, one thing to keep in mind and remind people about, even though Antonio Gibson has been an NFL running back for the last 2 years, we all know about the fumbling issues. We all know about some of the injury concerns. But remember, there's a lot that goes into the vision and the anticipation and the cutbacks. And that's one thing that Antonio Gibson just didn't arrive here with, David, and still is trying to find and develop because, again, he was a college wide receiver, not an NFL running back. That's one thing that might be in the favor of Brian Robinson, the 3rd-round pick from Alabama. And then just quickly kind of wrapping up on the 3 up, in terms of my stock up, I should say. And again, this is maybe low-hanging fruit. Jahan Dotson, I know Ron talked about him playing bigger than his size. I covered Pierre Garçon when he was here in 2012, and I always used to say to Pierre, look, dude, you're listed at 6'2", 215. You play about 6'2", 220, 225 because he can go up and get it. He can use his body as a shield. Jahan is not that big, not even as big as Pierre Garçon was listed and naturally, but Jahan somehow plays a little bit bigger than his size. He's not teeny weeny. We know about his catch radius and all of that. And then Kendall Fuller, I think, I think he's pressed in man and challenged in man, which is why they play a lot more zone, even though they want to play more man. I don't know how they're going to deal with that because there's other guys. You mentioned one of them, St-Juste, who normally is better in man. Certainly William Jackson III. I don't know how they're going to do all this, David, but Kendall Fuller, when he's in zone and when he's comfortable, especially early in years, the last 2 years, he is really, really, really good. Now, he tails off a little bit towards the end, so that's something to keep an eye on. But Kendall Fuller, when he's fresh and spry, he's still pretty darn good and everything that the Commanders thought they were getting when they paid for him. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Commanders podcast, we have a bunch of news and notes, plus our stock down as we look towards the open practice at FedEx Field on Saturday. That's next right here on LOC. But first, guys, level with me. We've all been in a situation at some point in our lives when we're a little bit light on cash. If you work in radio, you're always light in cash. Maybe you could only afford to put a few gallons of gas in your tank, or if you get another save the date for a wedding or an anniversary, you're kind of wondering, how are you going to afford a gift that maybe won't embarrass you? That's where Dave can help. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. And now our friends at Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Hindsight is 2020. You can't change the past, but what if you could get a little help from your future self? Well, that's a good question. Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little bit of cash, and now you can again with Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill up your tank, buy that wedding gift, or catch up on bills, or maybe have a good time for yourself. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hang-ups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app, and now you can too, to get the financial relief you need and they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch, need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app in the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC, and of course, future you will thank you. All right, thanks once again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first view of the day. So, David, just finishing up the stock down. Again, you wrote this up in two different pieces, SI.com and Fan Nation, covering the Commanders. And I wanted to ask you basically where you kind of go with your stock down, because I have a couple of bigger names, if you will, that might cause some controversy. So I'll set you up and you can go first.
I'm looking forward to that. So my name's not quite as big as yours, I imagine, and that's fine. But again, I kind of stuck with the wide receiver, cornerback, tight end groups, right? And from a wide receiver position, it's Marken Michel. And again, if you've been listening to the show, Marken Michel is a guy who impressed during OTAs, he impressed during the mini camps, and perhaps what kind of elevated some of the hopes and dreams and expectations for me coming to training camp is the fact that he was hitting and connecting on a lot of deep routes with Taylor Heineke, and that's something that we haven't seen a lot of, during Taylor's time on a football field. So to see that and to hopefully continue to see that was something I was really looking forward to. It just kind of hasn't happened and come together for him out here on the practice field. It doesn't say he hasn't made any catches or made any plays, just not quite at the clip that you would want him to in order to really kind of be considered a competitor for one of those last, one or two spots on the 53-man roster. There were some thoughts that maybe he would jump into some of the special teams duties, but really hasn't been doing a whole lot of that. It doesn't look like. So, he's the kind of a guy who's kind of starting to tail off a little bit, but there's always time. We've only been through 8 days of practice so far. And of course, when the fans enter the stadium on Saturday, that's a big opportunity to go out there and make some noise for yourself. And then going to the cornerback room, Corn Elder, the veteran, he's a savvy veteran. He's around the ball a lot, but when you talk about interceptions and kind of really making those splash plays, not as many in training camp as we saw again during OTAs and the mini camp. Now, where this is really going to hurt Corn is that there are other players like Christian Holmes is flashing from time to time. Obviously, Percy Butler. I know Percy's a safety, but when you talk about DBs, coaches, it's a certain amount of corners, a certain amount of safeties, but then you also have just a certain amount of DBs because so many of these guys can potentially do other things for you. So Corn specifically competing against some of those cornerbacks like Christian Holmes, but he is just kind of competing in that defensive backfield as a whole. Of course, Benjamin St-Juste. And the way I look at it, Kendall Fuller, Willem Jackson, Benjamin St-Juste, I think they're locks obviously for the roster. Christian Holmes is looking really good, so I feel like he's probably going to make the roster. That's 4. Danny Johnson right now is basically your backup nickel. Like when they go to second team nickel, Danny Johnson is a guy, or Benjamin St-Juste getting a little bit extra coaching real quick. Danny Johnson comes in and he's made some plays while he's been in there as well. So really, you've already got maybe 5 corners that are kind of holding on to roster spots. So for Corn Elder, there's maybe one spot. I don't know how many exactly they're going to keep, but there might only be one spot left. And he's the veteran kind of going after it. So he's got to come out there and show that he's going to take a hold of it instead of just kind of wait for it to land in his lap. And then tight end Armani Rogers. And this one I kind of really feel bad about because, it's the second week of training camp. He's an undrafted free agent. Like, how can you say stock down on a guy like this? Just the fact that you're on a football field is a win, and it is. But right now, Chris, he's the only tight end really not making big splashes kind of every single day. So he is very clearly falling behind the class. That's not like he doesn't look bad for an undrafted tight end. It's just everybody else, even the undrafted guy like Curtis Hodges and then the international player Sammis Reyes, they look kind of really further advanced than what Rogers is showing right now. Still, practice squad. I mean, hey, there are a lot of guys out there that would do a lot of things for a practice squad spot in the National Football League.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. All right, I'm going to keep this. What's that old acronym? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Well, listen, I'm probably not going to endear myself to many Commanders fans here by saying this, but my stock down is going to be three guys that I need to see more of, and I need to see more consistency of health. Performance, what have you. So I'm going to start with Carson Wentz, right? We all know that we talk about Carson a lot. We all know that the problem is when it's not pretty and when it's not there. And they're still, I know it's early. I know they just put on the pads. Again, I don't think the pads really affect the timing of the passing game as much as maybe people make it out. Maybe I'm missing something there. I know, they went wide receivers, corners, and all that stuff the other day. Fine. This is a build in progress. I understand it's a totally new system, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I understand there's a growing curve. I understand he didn't practice with Terry McLaurin until early July or mid-July or whatever it was. I get it all. I get all the reasons, all the excuses. I just need more out of my starting quarterback. I've seen so much bad quarterback play here. I can't take it anymore. I've seen the worst. I've seen dreadful. And he's not dreadful, but he's far, far from the answer right now. And it's going to take a long time to drop my guard and my reservation. I'll move on from there and just say this. Curtis Samuel is another guy that right now I want to believe, I want to buy in, I want to say, hey, they're doing the right thing, taking care of him, going slow, ramping them up, ramping them down like an escalator, all that stuff. Maybe this is the sports talk radio guy in me. I don't have much patience left. And I want to see, the ability to go out and practice like a regular football player and be able to help this team. Again, maybe that's asking for too much. Maybe that's dumb. Maybe that's ignorant. That's just what I feel. That's just what I want to see. I want it so badly to work out for Curtis Samuel and the Commanders that I just need to see more. And then lastly, I'll say this. For a guy looking for a contract, I watched Daron Payne closely when I was out at practice earlier this week, David. And I saw a lot of the same problem that I always tend to see with Daron Payne, which is hot and cold, motor on, motor off. One play, he jumped the snap, right? They got him on a hard count. He got back online or on sides. And then he literally went for the motion and it was just kind of jogging and lollygagging his way through the play. Now, again, that's not every play. I want to be careful to not label somebody with a broad brush, but I've seen too many times in Daron Payne's career where he is hot and he is cold. When he's hot, he's great. When he's cold, he's invisible. And I need to see more consistency, more effort, more motor, more everything from Daron Payne if he wants that big contract that we know he wants, that he partially held out of OTAs for. Mm-hmm. We know he's going to get from somewhere. But the question is should it be from here? And if it's going to be from here, I need to see more. I need to see more consistency. So that's my 3 down.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say this. I mean, the Carson conversation, I think, honestly, we might be able to make it a full episode. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. We will talk about that at a later time. And hopefully, look, some of our listeners, viewers out there, drop us a line on what your expectations are on Carson Wentz in this first year as the starting quarterback of the Washington Commanders. Maybe the only year. Who knows? You know what I mean? And I think that's where a good conversation is, realistic expectations for Carson Wentz. I think that we can do that for another show here later on down the line. But when it comes to Daron, you need to see that production. There is a formational thing that I've seen this team start to do in practice that I'm not going to give away publicly because I don't think that Jack Del Rio would probably appreciate that too much. But it is very exciting, and I hope that we get to see some of these things that we're seeing on the practice field in games and game situations. Last thing, I mean, really the big thing about Curtis, and I'm on that side too, where I'm kind of weary about this whole, ramping him up, bringing him down thing. But I will tell you this is the only counter I have for that possibly is on Wednesday when he was out there in pads, didn't do the one-on-ones, but he did everything else, and he looked good. He did not look like a guy that had missed practice. So if that's what you get, even after you shut him down for 3 or 4 days, I'm starting to believe that maybe, okay, that could be a thing that works. But of course, that is a story that is still to be told over the next 4 or so weeks before we get to the regular season. But we still have to get to another segment on this show. We got some news, some notes, some exciting things happening around the Washington Commanders that we're going to talk about, and we're going to do so thanks to our friends at betonline.net, because they are the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, where the San Diego Padres, congratulations, you will be the World Series champions. NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered for it all. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening right now. BetOnline, where the game starts. Final segment of the Locked On Commanders podcast, here to wrap up the week, kind of. Chris will be at FedEx Saturday night. I will be, I don't know, at that point in time, I think I'll be about 10 hours into a 14-hour road trip to Tampa, Florida, where I will be spending the next week covering Buccaneers training camp, and then I will be back on the Commanders beat here. We're going to still have you covered next week. Chris will record an episode after practice Saturday night. We'll drop that. That will be our last episode until Tuesday. So that will kind of be our Monday drop, right? It's just going to drop on Saturday. So you got all weekend to check that out. Or if you want to wait till Monday, your commute or whatever you do normally to check that out, by all means, go ahead and do that. And then we will be back with you again Tuesday morning, Monday night on YouTube as usual. And then the rest of the week. And then I will be back before you know it. And we'll be talking Washington Commanders live in-person observations again. But Chris, we got some news and notes that we got to get to before we close out of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a bunch going on, including, one thing that's cool. We know the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction ceremonies is this weekend, but maybe Commanders fans, didn't realize this because I forgot about it. A defensive line coach for the Commanders, certainly an interesting position group, Sam Mills III, who's been a part of this coaching staff since Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio took over. He's going to be part of honoring and enshrining his late father, David, former Carolina Panthers linebacker, the great late Sam Mills. He was the one to receive the news this past February as part of his dad's induction, and obviously a tremendous honor for the Mills family. And I know Sam the third is looking this. It strikes me every time at this year, though, and this is, we're not the only ones, right, that the Hall of Fame is a wonderful place. I get to go to Canton quite a bit because my kids live there, and it would be a better place if guys like Joe Jacoby, who was, of course, a leader and one of the great patriarchs, if you will, of the Hogs, left tackle Joe Jacoby, and my colleague at Audacy DC 106.7 The Fan, Brian Michel, were in the hallowed halls, or at least strongly up for consideration. And that's part of the problem, too. It's not like they're just missing. They're not there, and yet everyone feels around here, Washington, D.C., and in Command Central, that they both belong in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So here's hoping that they one day soon get there. But again, a tremendous honor for the Mills family as well on the induction of Sam Mills, the former Carolina linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think every fan base and even media circle has like certain players from their franchise or the franchise they covers history that they feel are being snubbed. But I mean, some of these are very, very easy to kind of, not understand, but kind of justify and say like, this is why this guy deserves to be in there. So very good. But yeah, I mean, very happy for the Mills family. Sam Mills, one of my favorite linebackers when I was coming up as a young football fan. So very happy to see him getting, the recognition he deserves and seeing his son be able to go and do that with him. Or for
Absolutely. Him. In addition, David, the team filled out and made a roster move. You had reported this earlier, along with others. Drew White, who unfortunately tore his ACL, he has been he has been waived injured. If he clears the waivers process, he'll revert back to the Commanders injured reserve, and they can retain his rights, rehab him, all that stuff, get him ready again for a shot next year. But they did, with that open roster spot, sign cornerback Devontae Bosby, who was with the USFL New Jersey Generals and My unofficial count is 10 now NFL teams for Devontae Bowsby. And again, he's added to that corner group. You were mentioning Corn Elder earlier. Who knows? Maybe he pushes him off the roster bubble or something like that. Maybe there's an injury that we don't know about, but clearly they like something about him, even though he hasn't been able to stay with the team. And oh, by the way, one other thing, he's been taking command for a while. You know how? He played for the San Antonio Commanders.
Yeah, there you go.
That was their slogan too. So he's used to taking command.
I mean, he's a vet. Like he's coming to show everybody else how to take command. Really, if you think about it.
Is he going to tell you how to take command?
I'm good. I've taken command plenty of times. I thought it was interesting. No linebacker. I think, the more we get into this, I was telling a few other people too, like, I think that when, because Ron Rivera continuously, said like, we probably should address the linebacker position, and it never happened. I think they have addressed the linebacker position. It kind of goes into some of the things that we've seen in practice and during training camp. They've addressed it by essentially trying to minimize the importance of it. And it's kind of smart if you think about it. Really, it's they're not addressing it by bringing in a veteran; they're addressing it by making their defense less linebacker dependent.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that is something we've speculated on that they were planning on doing, whether you look at a 5-1-5 alignment or a 4-2-5 alignment. There's all sorts of different things. And with the increased emphasis on the Buffalo nickel, certainly that is a big thing. And David, before we hit the road, one thing we should mention, the team also announced on Friday, I should say on Thursday, excuse me, I got my days all mixed up. The team also announced that they will be inducting Mike Bass into the franchise's Ring of Fame on the season opener against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're not old enough to remember, and I would include myself in this mix because his most notable moment happened when I wasn't even born. In the Super Bowl, a touchdown return against the undefeated Miami Dolphins in the Commanders Washington NFL franchise's first ever Super Bowl appearance. He had a touchdown return. So congratulations all these years later to Mike Bass.
Absolutely. Yeah. 1973. My father, I don't know, around that time probably was never imagining that I would be in existence, let alone watching football. So.
And yet here you are, stuck with me.
We are.
Aren't
stuck
you
with you? And watching a team, covering a team that I watched win a Super Bowl. I want to say that was one of the Super Bowls that was played while we lived in Germany and had like 3 channels to watch. So yeah, good times.
Well, I mean, at least you got to watch. It's been a long time since anybody around here got to watch anything good. All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first view of the day. Now, of course, make the second listen and view the Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keeping fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from all around the league, because training camp doesn't equal a break in the action. As David mentioned, be back with an episode that we'll record from FedEx Field and publish on Sunday. So make sure you check that out. And then David will rejoin us, as he mentioned, from Tampa later on next week. We will have you covered as the Commanders head towards their preseason opener against the Carolina Panthers. If you want to hop in, 301-615-3577 on the voicemail or Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com. For David Harrison, who's covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. Please be safe. Be kind to one another. Don't drive like a maniac like Marquise Hollywood Brown did. And thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.